I mean, in a nutshell, you're a very small nation. India's a bloody huge nation. Mm-hmm. But are there some universalities here that could apply across?
Right. Got to answer that, just that one by itself?
Yeah, go on.
Okay,
go on.
Well, maybe a fairer comparison is to look at India compared to other large, complex societies, and China is a good example. India has the great advantage of a democracy, which ultimately I think is the most sustainable political system that we know of. But it doesn't have the advantage of accountability of elected representatives. China, in a curious way, despite not having a democracy in the political sense, has a very high sense of accountability on the part of its leaders. That isn't so for all authoritarian regimes, but it is so for China. And they have created a culture of accountability. I think India can create a culture.
I'm slightly baffled.
I think India can. We can come back to that if you want to.
Well, we don't have time.
I think India can create that culture. There's no reason why democracy should not have a culture of accountability with it. It just means that middle-class voters especially have to hold people accountable for what they promised and to see if they deliver. And it can be done.
All right, well, we're going to talk more about China and accountability over coffee. To some of our sensitive flowers in the West, the authoritarianism that underpins that approach to managing a society feels uncomfortable to us.
Yeah, so that's a caricature. I mean, even The Economist, which is not exactly a cheerleader for Singapore, would say, as it just did in its editorial form of obituary when Mr. Lee Kuan Yew passed away, that Singapore has free, fair, and regular elections. We are a parliamentary democracy, not in exactly the same mold as Britain or the United States, certainly.
No, I mean,
but we are a parliamentary democracy, and an elected government makes decisions which it feels are in the best interests of the country, today and for the future. And we are accountable for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a democracy of sorts. You don't have a genuinely free, truly liberated press.
Not in the British sense.
No, well, not in any sense. I mean,
but in the...
much as I'd like to take credit for the notion of a free press, it's not a British idea.
I didn't mean it entirely as a compliment, but as a description. But as a description.
You are missing page 3 of the Sun newspaper, and that's no great loss, I agree. But actually there is a serious point. When journals that are respected and have a role to play, like, you know, the Far East Economic Review, for years and years are hounded by government.
The rules are very clear and simple. Singapore is an extremely open society, by virtue of the number of foreign publications that are circulated, well over 5,000. The fact that Singaporeans are probably more than any other society broadband penetrated. The fact that they're English educated and have access to a whole world of information on the internet. It's an extremely open society. There's no doubt about it. We are unconventional in requiring in our laws that we have the right of reply. When foreign publications publish something that we feel is false or misleading, we just have the right of reply. And when publications, as you know very well, refuse to publish a reply, we impose restrictions on them that affect the advertising revenues. Unconventional, you might not agree with it, but the larger point is this. I think we all need some humility. We all need some humility on the ways that best advance a liberal order. To take Lord Griffith's point this morning, a liberal order economically, socially, and politically. We all need some liberty, some humility as to how we achieve that, not just for today, but for tomorrow. How do you sustain it? How do you best sustain it? The most thoughtful observers in the West of the view that you need some buffers, you need some margins of safety, and you need some compromises on some liberties in order to achieve others. And the freest possible media is not the only liberty we aspire to. I do think it's a good idea, by the way. It appeals to my ideals, but it's not the only liberty you aspire to. You do aspire to a liberty of being able to walk the streets freely, particularly if you're a woman or a child at any time of the night. You aspire to the liberty of living in a city that's not defined by its most disorderly elements. You aspire to the liberty of having an opportunity for an education and a job regardless of your race or your social background. And you aspire to a liberty of practicing your own religion without fear of bigotry or discrimination. Those are very important liberties in many societies, and they're lacking in many societies.
Well,
I think one of the very important lessons of the last 50 years is that traditional concepts of welfare and social expenditure and government intervention have led to a weakening of private initiative and personal responsibility. Not because that was the intent. It never was the intent. It was never the social democratic intent to weaken private initiative and family responsibility. I mean, look at the Scandinavian countries. They used to be amongst the most hardworking countries in the world. The Swedes were incredibly hardworking, industrious people.
You're using past tense, are you? Have Swedes become lazy, or what's
present active tense. They're a good society in many ways, so I didn't mean to.
Well, Swedes will get the chance to comment on this in a moment.
They're a good society in many ways, and they're willing to pay high taxes to keep their system going. But the point is, there are ways in which an active government can intervene to support social mobility, to develop opportunities, and to take care of the old, which doesn't undermine personal and family responsibility. And that's the compact that we're trying to achieve. It's almost a paradox.
You mean you're a bit more ruthless? Is that what you're saying?
No, we are achieving a paradox of active government support for personal responsibility, rather than active government support to take over personal responsibility or community responsibility.
Do you believe in the concept of a safety net?
So we believe in a concept of support for you taking up opportunities. So we don't have unemployment.
I believe in the sometimes simplicity of yes or no answers. What about this idea of a safety net? Do you believe? Does Singapore believe in the notion of a safety net for those who fall between the cracks of a successful economy?
I believe in the notion of a trampoline.
Yeah. So people are just bouncing up and down in Singapore.
No, I mean, it boils down to what policies you're talking about. If you provide help for someone who's willing to study in education, to study hard, if you provide help for someone who's willing to take up a job and work at it, and make life not so easy if you stay out of work. If you provide help for someone who wants to own a home, and we are very generous in our grants for home ownership, which is why we have 90% home ownership. And amongst the low-income population, more than 80% own their homes. It transforms culture. It's not just about transactions. It's not about the size of grant. It's about keeping alive a culture where I feel proud that I own my home and I earn my own success through my job. I feel proud that I'm raising my family.
It is a
keeping that culture going is what keeps a society vibrant.